Hey, it's Charlie Craven with Fly Fisherman Magazine, and for this month, the August-September issue, I'm going to tie Kyle Bakko's Fat Ass Hopper. This is actually a really cool hopper. Seems very complicated, but once you get into it, it's not so bad at all. Come along with me, we'll tie one up, see what you think. Good morning, boys and girls. It's Charlie Craven here today, and I am going to tie you Kyle Bakko's Fat Ass Hopper. This is a hopper that immediately caught my eye this year because it is one pretty realistic and tied pretty craftily. Using a lot of the same materials and in a pretty unique way. You end up with this big wide-bodied hopper that is a big buoyant fly, and of course could be tied smaller. I'm going to tie you a size 6 today. This is a 6. This is a big one, but this could be tied down to a 12 pretty easily. But a nice big wide-bodied hopper. It's got a really hoppery head. And at first it seems pretty complicated, and it's got a few parts, I'll say that, but once you kind of get your pieces arranged and tie a few of them, I think I joked with Kyle, it took me 14 tries to get it just right, but now I have 14 hoppers, and I don't know, 15, 16 by the time I do this video, so practice isn't all bad. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with a Tiemco 2487. No, it is not an 87. It is a 57. I misspoke. Tiemco 2457, which is a 2 extra heavy nymph hook, big curved scud style hook. So a little different than maybe what you're used to or what you would expect on a hopper pattern. But the reason he uses this heavy hook is this is going to help get the fly to keel over and land right every time. Kyle's got another fly called a Big Sky Hopper that's tied on a jig hook, much to the same effect. And I think without too much trying, you could tie this fly on a jig hook as well. I'm going to veer a little bit off of the way Kyle ties it. Kyle's got some, you could tell Kyle developed this fly and, had some pretty good thought process that went into it. I can't seem to get it done the same way that he does it. What Kyle does is he sticks the body on the hook and then builds the extended portion off facing out toward his thread hand, which just seems a little cumbersome to me. So I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to do it, the way I was first, what my first impression of this fly was anyway. And hopefully this will make this a little easier for you as well. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start I'm using some 110 denier magpie thread. This is dark brown, whatever color you want your segments to be. Vivus 8/0 would work very well here as well. And I'm using a dark brown, but I'm going to start this thread just behind the eye. And I'm going to wrap, and this is where I veer off from Kyle. Kyle doesn't start the thread yet. He kind of does the extended body portion first and then ties it down to the hook. But I'm going to put a thread base on the hook, and I'm going to wrap the thread back to where it hangs even with the point on the barb, like so. So you're pretty far down around the curve. Now the body of this fly is made with, in the size 6 version anyway, 3 layers of 2mm foam. And what I've got here is dark brown, tan, and gold, I think is what I've got there on the bottom. And this body is cut out with a River Road beaver tail cutter. So it's, I can get my fingers out of the way for you here. Let me stick my scissors in this, give you an idea what he looks like. Sort of a beaver tail shape. You can see there's an abdomen and a thorax or a head, and then sort of a long extended body. And what I did with this is I just put super glue, just Zap-A-Gap, on those sheets and glued them together and then put them under a stack of books until they dried. And that kept everything nice and flat. You can also use 3M Super 77, works very well for this. Same method, spray both sides, stick them together, put them under something heavy, let it dry, and then you can go through with your cutter, which is something like that, and cut all your shapes. Just incidentally, when they come out of the punch, they have this little nub on the front, and what you want to do is kind of come in from the front top to bottom and trim that off so you got a nice little round piece there. And that's what I've got here. Now before we get this started on here, what I want to do is I want to come in and I want to make a slit in this foam from the neck here just down the abdomen. I'm just going to try to draw a line here with my scissor blades so that you can kind of see it. Yeah, that shows up pretty well. We want to make a slit there, so I'm going to use a single edge razor blade. I'm going to make that slit as close to straight down the center as I can. And that'll be the part where it fits over the hook. So you can kind of get an idea of what I just did there. Now, one thing that Kyle says he does not do is glue this down to start with. But he is a lot better at this than I am. So I'm going to put a little shot of glue. My thread's hanging at the bend here. I'm going to put a little shot of glue at the bend of the hook. So I'm going to take some Zap-A-Gap and just put a bit there. Not all the way up the hook shank. Just there at the bit. We can glue the whole fly together later. But what I want to do is split that split. And you can see one of the things that you'll run into is if you put a bunch of glue on there, you can't really get that hook sunk down in there because that foam just grabs a hold of it so quickly. But I want my thread hanging about even. So I wrap that around there. About even with where that abdomen starts, the back of that detent. So there's a divot here, there's a divot here. I want it just about even there. And that's where I'm going to start this. And what I do is I try to square this up on the hook, and I'm going to take a turn around it and start to cinch it down, put another turn and another turn. And then what I do is I unwind those 3 turns. So I've compressed that foam. Now I can get that a little bit more tight in there. Put 3 or 4 turns right there at the bend, just to anchor that down. You can see where that thread jumped a little bit there? I'm going to undo that and get that a little straighter. Did I get rid of it? I didn't get rid of it. Stand by, I'm going to give it a push. All right. So now, to build the extended body, like I say, what Kyle does is he turns this hook around in the vise. But what I found works best for me is I'm just going to tilt this hook a little bit so that the extended body is facing up. And I'm going to take my bobbin with a relatively short length of thread, and I'm going to go about 1/3 of the way up, cross on top, and make the first segment. And I want to make 2 or 3 turns in that segment, like so. You see that thread crossed on the top. And then I'm going to go a little further up again, slightly descending in size, and make the next segment. And I want to stack those turns, 2 or 3 turns. And while I'm at it, I'm going to do the last one. I like to leave that last segment pretty small. Cinch that down. About 3 turns. I'll try to turn this so you can see what we just did. So the thread just crossed up. Let me get a hold of this. Crossed up as it went up the end of the body there. So then I'll put the hook back in the vise here. And now I'm going to work my thread forward again. Now, one thing you want to be careful of is as you work forward, you're crossing on top, and you want to make sure that your thread wraps aren't showing across the bottom. They should line up right with those segments. So it doesn't hurt. I'm just going to keep taking this out so you can see it. It doesn't hurt to take a peek at it every now and again and just make sure that you've got nice clean segments back there. Like so. So we've got our extended body coming off the back there. Yeah, we're looking pretty good. Now I can square my hook up a bit. Now we've got sort of this thorax section here. So we've got the head up here, which is just, the divot is just behind the eye, and then we've got the thorax. I'm going to divide that thorax in half and make another segment. And then I'm going to come forward, and just behind the hook eye in the divot for the head, I'll make the final segment. Like so. Looking pretty good. You can see nice even segments there. Everything's squared up on the hook. You do want to make sure that that stays straight. All right, now I'm going to cross my thread back into that second segment and just let it hang there. And this is where we're going to, see that? Let's get rid of that little crossover. There, I think that's a little cleaner. Now for the underwing, you can use barred flash shibu or voodoo fibers. And honestly, on this color fly, tan would probably be ideal, but I don't have any tan. So I'm going to use some olive ones. I'm going to take a little clump. What this is barred sort of filament. It's flat, very buggy. But I'm going to take a pretty good sized clump of this, and I'm going to tie it in right on top of the fly in that segment. You can sort of square it up. One of the nice things with this fly is you've got a big, wide arbor to tie everything in on, so that voodoo fiber is tied on top. I'm going to pick up the butt ends and trim those off as square as I can. And then I'm going to trim the long end just a little longer than the body, just square across, like so. Then I'm going to tie in the shell, and what the shell is a piece of 1mm foam, tan in this case, and again you can vary the colors as needed, but tan in this case, and I've cut it to a point. And what I want to do is I want to lay that point. This is for a size 6 hook. This is a 1/2 inch wide, so it's a much wider piece than you're probably thinking it is. It was certainly wider than what I thought it was going to be. But I'm going to put the base of this triangle just behind that segment, and I'm going to tie that down with a couple turns right there. Now, one of the things on a fly like this, where you've got multiple layers of foam, multiple layers of material all tied in at the same point, don't tie anything down with 10 turns. You can see I just put a couple turns over that, try to keep it centered on the hook, so just a couple turns at a time. And then while I'm there, I'm going to take about a 1/4 inch wide piece of orange, which is going to be my finder, make this fly a little easier to see, also cut to a point, and I'm going to lay this just short of the first piece, and I'll tie it in with a couple turns. And again, right on top. Try to make sure that that's centered. Relatively centered, okay. Now, the legs. This is one of the coolest things about this fly. The legs are just a strip of 1mm foam, and Kyle's got a really cool way of doing this, which never occurred to me, but the first time I saw it was like, yep, that's how you would do that. I have done this sweetgrass hopper and a bunch of different hoppers with these foam legs, and it was always much more complicated than it needed to be. I've just cut a strip of 1mm foam, and I'm going to lay it in here on my near side and catch it in this segment with a couple turns, like so. And then what I'm going to do, as I think of this, usually I do my near side first, but I'm going to do the far side so you can see what I'm about to do. So I'm going to lay this in here over here on the far side and just overlap the end a bit, catch it with a couple turns, like so. Now I'm going to come in with my scissors, try to get my hands out of the way here, and I'm going to cut an angle like so. That's going to make our leg. Now I've got the other side that matches the same angle, and I'll lay this in on the near side, put the knees about the same point, and catch it with a couple turns. And you can just come in and trim off that extra. So super simple way to do the thigh part of a hopper leg. That's going to change the way I do a lot of other flies as well. We'll finish out the leg once we're done with the fly, but that's the gist of how we're going to do that. I'm going to lift up this wide piece of foam. I'm going to creep my thread up in that same segment and cross it forward to the head segment. Now, once I get here, this is where things get interesting. I'm going to take some Zap-A-Gap, and you want, usually I have a little narrow Zap-A-Gap brush that I have thinned down with this little tiny brush so that I don't get too much glue on a fly at a time. The catch on this fly is we need a fair amount of glue, and we've got a lot of surface area to glue. So I'm going to use a full-size brush here, and I'm going to put some glue over the top of both of those segments, and then around the outside, just for those top two layers, the tan and brown layers. I'm going to put some glue on that. And don't go crazy with this. You don't want too much. But then I'm going to sort of flatten the brush out and coat as much of this tan sheet as I can. This is how the head is going to be made. So you want to make sure that you get glue all the way out to the ends and all the way to the edges, like so. Now comes the cool part. This is how this cool head is made. I'm going to fold this piece of tan foam forward over the top of the fly. And I want to be a little conscious trying to keep this centered. We're going to overlap it over the sides and pinch it around the front. And when I do this, I want to try to keep these two ends even, like so. Yeah, we did okay there. And you can see my thread is hanging in that second segment. Now I can tie that down. So we've started to build our little hopper head. I like to really pinch that foam down tight. And I don't cut it right away. I'm going to let that sit for just a minute. It'll be a little bit in our way. Oh heck, I'm feeling lucky. So I'm going to cut this just at a slight angle. This is going to kind of shape our hopper head. So just a slight angle to build that hopper head. And that one came out just right. It's starting to peel apart just a little bit. You can give it another little squeeze. Usually I have to maybe even put a little bit extra glue in there just to seal that front edge. But you can see how that overlaps. I'm a little more overlapped on my near side than I am on my far side. So not perfectly centered, but you know, close enough for the work that I'm doing. Now I'm going to fold that piece of orange forward and tie it down in the same segment, a couple turns, and then I can cut it square across. I do like to knock the corners off the front of this just because Kyle's sample had the corners knocked off. I'm not sure that makes one bit of difference, but now I feel better about it, and we're getting close to done. Now for the front legs, I'm going to take a piece of medium-sized sexy legs, and these are tan, and I'm going to tie one end in on my near side, just off the end of that thinner piece of tan foam, and then I'll fold the front end around and tie it in again on the far side, just forming a loop there. Like so. We can cut this front end and then position those legs as needed. We're pretty good. I'm going to shorten them up just a bit for our front legs. And then rather than whip finish this fly, which you can, this fly is so glue intensive, and glue and foam work so well together, I'm going to take and just run my super glue brush up and down my thread, starting from very close to the thread, or very close to the hook, and then I'm just going to take a few turns right through that area. You can see there's that glue sort of locks in there. Now my thread is locked in. I can come in and trim that thread out, and no whip finish required. We're going to further glue the rest of this fly, but we've got another step first. Now for the legs, to put the little kickers, from the knee down, the shin, I guess it would be, I'm going to take a piece of, and you can use medium or small size sexy legs for this, and what I'm going to do is tie an overhand knot in this piece of leg, like so. And I'll do it here on the far side first. I'm going to put this knot over the end of that point and then tighten it down. And we can come in, you can do this all at once, or just come in and trim this other end off. So we've got a perfect little hopper leg there. I'm going to do the same thing on my near side. If I can get this a little bit bigger. Thought I was being smart pre-tying these. Oh, I'm right up on the edge there. Trim that long end off. I don't like the way that one's setting. I'm going to do it again for you. Hopper legs are my nemesis. I was just a little too close to that end. Now he's setting right. I'm going to trim that. One thing that I've been trying to do as I have tied this fly is try to decide a rule for the legs. When you tie those knots, your knots are directional. And I've talked about this on other hopper flies with knotted legs. The knots are directional. And what I've done is put the knot on the on the near side of both legs. So the knot is on the inside of this far leg, and it's on the outside of this near leg. So their knots are all facing me, and that seems to make the legs sit a little bit more consistently. That's the closest thing I've come to a rule on that. I'm going to trim those both off just a little bit longer. I've got a weird curl there that I don't love, but so now we're going to come in with a little bit of Zap-A-Gap and just hit those knots. Just a little coat on there. Those will glue right to that foam. So just a little shot of glue there. Then I'm going to take my brown marker and I'm just going to press the tip of the marker in to make a perfect little hopper eye. You guys know how I like eyes. Perfect little hopper eye. And then you can turn the fly over and you can model up the belly a bit. Kyle likes these spots. So I'm just going to make a few spots up the abdomen, but you can get as artistic as you like. And then finally come in and put a little coat of glue on all those thread wraps that are attached to the hook. But that actually has been a really fun fly. One of the cool things about this job writing for Fly Fisherman magazine is I get to tie a lot of flies that I maybe not necessarily normally would. Lots of different stuff, and a lot of times I look at a fly and I'm like, oh man, I don't know if I want to tie that. And then I sort of force myself to get into it, and I expand my horizons, and I learn some new things. So I hope you did too. Twist up some of these fat ass hoppers. This is a cool fly, particularly in a smaller size. This is a great big one. I am going to tie some smaller ones. I've got a smaller size cutter. These cutters are beaver tail style foam body cutters, and this is a medium that I'm using. A small would be for a 10 to 12 is what it says. So the next size down would be the small. On a small, I'd probably just do 2 layers of foam, just 2 colors, maybe tan over yellow or brown over tan or whatever, whatever colors you want. But that is Kyle's cool fly. Pretty cool, different way of doing things, not the same old stuff you've been doing, which is always more fun. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Thanks for watching. I'm Charlie.